Good evening and welcome to News of the World. It's Wednesday, July 22nd. Tonight we drift slowly across 28 countries, from Romania to Morocco. There's nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to be. Settle in and let the world turn. Romania has been looking to the Black Sea and to what lies beneath it for a good while now. This week, its foreign minister pointed to a milestone at Neptun Deep, the offshore gas project that carries some of the country's biggest hopes for energy independence. It's a story about patience, really. The Black Sea has held these reserves for ages, and bringing them up has taken years of negotiation, investment, and political will. Now, something has shifted, enough that a cabinet minister is willing to call it a milestone publicly. The timing is not lost on anyone. These same waters have been uneasy. A tanker carrying gas toward Ukraine was struck off Romania's coast recently, wounding 3 people. Ukraine's foreign minister responded, and the incident pushed the shadow of the war a little closer to NATO territory. So when Romania talks about its own gas, it's not abstract. It's about standing on steadier ground in a region where the ground has shifted more than once. Neptun Deep matters because it's Romania's, a resource pulled from its own sea, feeding its own grid, and perhaps easing a dependence that has long made the country look elsewhere for fuel. The foreign minister didn't frame it as triumph. It was more like a quiet mark of progress, the kind you note before getting back to work. If you're still with me, picture that sea at night, dark, vast, and underneath it, something beginning to move. San Marino sits tucked into the hills of the Italian peninsula, one of the oldest republics in the world, and these days it has a young man named Federico San Martini carrying its name onto a basketball court. He's listed among the player profiles for the FIBA UN 18 Eurobasket 2026, Division C, the tier where smaller basketball nations compete, where the crowds are modest but the pride runs deep. For a country San Marino's size, fielding a national team at any level is an achievement in itself. Every player on that roster knows the weight of it, not the pressure of a global audience, but something more intimate. They play for families, for neighbors, for a flag that doesn't always make the international sports pages. Federico San Martini is one of those names now. A young athlete stepping into a European tournament, wearing the colors of a republic that has endured for centuries. We don't know yet how his tournament will unfold. The box scores will come later, the memories with them. But there's something quietly remarkable about a teenager from a tiny mountaintop nation lining up against peers from across the continent, knowing that everyone watching is someone who knows him. That's the particular dignity of small nation sport. No anonymity, no distance between player and crowd. Just a young man, a ball, and a country behind him that fits more or less within a single view from a tower. Luxembourg has quietly taken a step that will change how its businesses keep their books. The government has approved a draft law that would make electronic invoicing mandatory for transactions between companies, what's known in the trade as B2B e-invoicing. It sounds technical, and it is. But behind the bureaucracy lies something simpler, a country deciding that the paper invoice, that small document so many of us have filed away in drawers and shoeboxes, is finally being shown the door. For a place like Luxembourg, small in size, considerable in financial services, this matters. The country has long positioned itself as a hub for commerce and administration in the heart of Europe. Moving invoices into digital form is part of a wider effort across the continent to make tax reporting more transparent and more efficient. It means businesses will need to adjust their systems, their software, their habits. There will be a transition, no doubt, and some firms will feel it more than others. But there's also something quietly modern about it, a recognition that even the most ordinary acts of commerce, the sending of a bill, the settling of an account, can be done more cleanly than before. If you're still with me, You might think of your own desk, your own receipts, and the slow migration of paper into light. Luxembourg is simply joining that tide, one draft law at a time. Honduras has begun a project both simple in concept and vast in scale. Fingerprinting and facial scanning for 1 million minors already listed in its national registry. The purpose is to curb trafficking in a country that has seen too many of its children disappear. This is a practical kind of care. A child whose face and fingerprints are recorded, whose identity sits safely in a system, becomes harder to make vanish. Trafficking feeds on anonymity, on children slipping through gaps no one is watching. Honduras is trying, in this measured way, to close some of those gaps. 1 million children already registered. Think of that for a moment. 1 million small faces being held in a country's keeping, not for surveillance, but for safety. If you're still with me, picture the quiet scenes it must involve. A parent brings a child forward. A small hand presses against a scanner. There's trust in that. Trust that this ordinary act might matter. It won't solve everything, and no one in Honduras would claim it will. But it's a deliberate step, taken where steps matter. And so these days, the work goes on, steadily, one child at a time, across a country, quietly looking after its own. Switzerland has always held a particular place in the European imagination, a high-price island of stability in the middle of a restless continent. The economist Adam Tooze describes it that way, noting how families from neighboring France have long trusted Swiss institutions with their money. The arrangement is simple and ancient in financial terms. Switzerland is expensive, Switzerland is steady, and for generations people have been willing to pay for that steadiness. French families looking across the border see a place where savings can sit quietly, protected by institutions that have made neutrality and discretion into something close to a national craft. What's striking is how that reputation has traveled. Even in the world of artificial intelligence, a startup recently raised $20 million promising to be, in its words, the Switzerland of AI compute, a neutral middle ground in a fiercely competitive industry. The name itself has become shorthand for trust, and life on the island goes on in its own quiet rhythm. E-bike demand is surging across Swiss towns and mountain roads. Artists are receiving grants to develop new work. Cyclists are already looking ahead to mountain bike championships in Lenzerheide. The high-price island, it turns out, is also a place where people move through the landscape and make things. Money finds its way to Switzerland because Switzerland has made itself steady. And steadiness, in a world that rarely is, carries a value all its own. Portugal has set its sights on an old idea, done at a new scale. The country is backing 5 gigawatts of pumped storage hydropower by the year 2040, a commitment that places water, rather than fuel, at the center of how it plans to keep the lights on. Pumped storage is simple in concept, if enormous in execution. 2 reservoirs, one high, one low. When there's extra power, say, from wind farms spinning through a quiet night, you use it to push water uphill. When demand rises, you let it flow back down through turbines and the electricity returns. It's a battery, but made of gravity and landscape. For Portugal, this is more than infrastructure. It's a bet on what the country's grid will need as it leans further into renewables. Wind and sun are abundant along the Atlantic coast, but they come and go. Storage is what turns intermittent power into reliable power, and pumped hydro is among the oldest and largest forms of it we have. 5 gigawatts is a serious figure, enough to shape how an entire nation balances its energy across hours and seasons. And the timeline, stretching toward 2040, suggests a willingness to think in decades rather than news cycles. There's something steady about the approach. Not a dramatic pivot, but a patient build. valleys and reservoirs doing quiet work, long after the headlines have moved on. If you're still with me, it's a reminder that some of the most important choices a country makes are the ones it plans for slowly and builds to last. Nepal sits between two great neighbors, and for a long time its goods and people have moved by road, by foot, by patience. A new rail connection with India is planned, and the promise is simple: transit costs should come down. For a landlocked country, that matters more than it might sound. Everything that arrives from the south, fuel, fertilizer, grain, machinery, has to cross the flat borderlands and then climb, slowly, into the hills. Every extra rupee spent on that journey is a rupee that doesn't reach a farmer, a shopkeeper, a family. The details of the route are still taking shape, and the full report isn't available to share tonight. But the headline alone tells us something worth holding. Two countries that have traded for centuries are looking to make the path between them easier. Rail lines do that. They carry weight quietly. They don't rush, and they don't tire. If you've traveled in this part of the world, you know the rhythm of it. Trucks waiting at border posts, goods unloaded and reloaded, the long human choreography of moving things from one country to another. A rail link won't erase all of that, but it might ease it. And in a place where the land itself rises so sharply from the plains to the high Himalaya, anything that makes the journey simpler is worth noting. So that's the word from Nepal this week, a line on a map slowly becoming steel. Antigua and Barbuda, like several of its Caribbean neighbors, has long offered something the world finds useful: a passport in exchange for investment. It's called citizenship by investment, and for small island nations, it has been a quiet lifeline revenue that helps fund the ordinary workings of a country. But these days, that arrangement is drawing careful eyes from Europe. The phrase that keeps surfacing is a race to the bottom, a concern that as nations compete for applicants, standards may slip, prices may drop, and the whole system invites the kind of scrutiny no one welcomes. The European Union has been looking closely at these programs, weighing questions of security and integrity that small countries can't easily set aside. And so Antigua and Barbuda finds itself at a familiar crossroads for island states, balancing the need for revenue against the need for credibility. It's not a crisis. It's a quiet reckoning. The kind that comes when a solution that worked for years starts to cost something harder to measure. There are larger questions here too, about what sovereignty means when your economy leans on what you can sell, and who gets to judge whether you're selling it carefully enough. For now, the program continues. The conversations continue. And in Antigua and Barbuda, as across the Caribbean, people who govern small nations are doing what they've always done: reading the weather, watching the horizon, deciding what to hold on to and what to let change. Grenada sits in the southern Caribbean, a small island nation whose history reaches back through centuries of colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. A genealogist from the United Kingdom has been tracing a family line through that difficult history, following names and records that connect British ancestors to the system of slavery that once operated on the island. The work of genealogy is patient by nature. You follow threads. You sit with documents that reduce human lives to entries in a ledger, a sale, a baptism, a death, and sometimes, if you're persistent, those entries begin to breathe again. They become people. They become family. For this researcher, the trail leads to Grenada, where sugar plantations once relied on enslaved labor brought from West Africa. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, and emancipation reached the colonies in 1834, but records from those years remain, scattered and partial, but there. In parish registers and plantation inventories, names survive, sometimes only first names, sometimes not even that. What makes this story worth carrying is not the horror of the history, though that horror is real and should not be looked away from. It is the act of recovery, someone choosing to follow the thread backward into a painful past, refusing to let the names disappear. Grenada knows this history in its soil, in its place names, in the faces of its people. And now, from across the sea, one more family is learning where it came from, and what was endured along the way. Colombia is moving through a political transition, and the country is feeling its weight in quiet, complicated ways. Outgoing President Gustavo Petro used his final speeches to do two things at once: to urge his supporters to defend the economic reforms his government pursued, and to challenge the results of the election that will replace him. On Independence Day, he stood before the nation and questioned the very process that brought his successor to power. It is a tense note to leave on. The president-elect, De La Espriella, has already begun shaping what comes next. He has laid out energy priorities for his coming administration and pushed back against suggestions that he aims to consolidate control over Congress. And beyond Colombia's borders, a new relationship is taking form. The Trump administration is seeking what it calls a reset with Colombia after the election, and the country is set to host an office of a new anti-cartel alliance out of Washington. So Colombia finds itself at a crossroads, one president contesting the vote even as he departs, another building a program before he is sworn in, and a powerful neighbor reaching across with both an open hand and a fresh agenda. These are the weeks where the future takes shape, not all at once, but in the slow back and forth of a democracy finding its next footing. Panama has always been a place where the world's goods pass through, quietly, on their way to somewhere else. These days, the canal that carries its name is passing a little less. Authorities have curbed the number of ship bookings and suspended auctions for close-in transit slots, the last-minute passages that vessels sometimes bid on to move through sooner. The reason is simple, and it's been building for a while. Water levels are down. The canal depends on freshwater lakes to lift and lower ships between two oceans, and when the rains don't come as they should, there's less to give. It's not a crisis announced with alarm. It's more like a slow tightening, the kind of adjustment that shippers feel in schedules and costs long before anyone else notices. Global trade, already tested in recent years by disruptions of every kind, meets another quiet challenge here. A few fewer ships each day, a few more days of waiting. Panama knows this waterway better than anyone, and the canal's operators have managed lean seasons before. They've learned to read the lakes, to calibrate what the channel can bear. If you're still with me, you might picture those ships at anchor in the bay, patient, enormous, waiting their turn under a wide sky. The canal will keep working, it always does, just a little more slowly for now, while the water decides what it can spare. Vanuatu has given its name to a new kind of conversation with Australia, one called the Nakamal Agreement. A Nakamal, for those who haven't wandered into one, is a gathering place. In villages across these 80-plus islands, it's where people come together to talk things through, often over kava, slowly, with care. So when Vanuatu and Australia chose that word for their understanding, they were saying something about how they wanted to do business face-to-face with the patience the region has always demanded. The Pacific has been drawing more attention these days from larger powers near and far. Everyone seems to want a foothold. But Vanuatu has long preferred to make its own way, accepting partnership without surrendering the steering. The Nakamal Agreement, as it's being called, fits that pattern. A bilateral understanding shaped on Vanuatu's terms, or at least in Vanuatu's language. Details remain limited, and perhaps that's fitting for something still taking shape. What matters is the framing. Two countries choosing to name their cooperation after a place where people sit together and listen before they speak. If you're still with me, picture this scene: an archipelago scattered across warm water, each island with its own nakamal, its own way of deciding what matters. And somewhere in that tradition, a quiet signal to the wider world: we'll talk, but we'll do it our way. Madagascar sits in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa, and it has been going its own way for a very long time. It is, by many accounts, one of the most important places for life on this planet, an island where evolution was left to its own imagination. What grew up there grew up nowhere else. The lemurs, the baobabs, the forests that hum with creatures found only on that one piece of land. There is a small frog called the golden mantella, no bigger than a thumbnail, the color of a bright sunset, Madagascar's tiny jewel, holding its ground in the island's damp places. It is easy to think of biodiversity as a number in a report somewhere, but in Madagascar, it feels different. It feels like a kind of stubbornness, life insisting on its own forms, its own colors, its own quiet logic, century after century. The highlands roll out green and terraced, the coasts breathe warm air from the sea. And running through all of it, something rare and worth noticing, a living world that belongs entirely to itself. If you're still with me, hold that image for a moment. An island where life found its own way, and still does quietly, even now. Peru sits along the western edge of South America, where the land meets the Pacific along a restless seam of the earth. This week, a 5.5 magnitude earthquake shook the country, a tremor strong enough to be felt widely, though the full picture of its reach is still settling. Earthquakes are not strangers here. The same tectonic forces that built the Andes keep the ground uncertain, and Peruvians have long learned to live with that uncertainty, to feel the earth move and wait, and then to check on one another. What we know is the magnitude and the map, a line drawn through familiar terrain, marking where the ground remembered what it is. What we don't know yet, the details of damage, of homes, of people, will come in time, and we'll hold those stories carefully when they do. If you're still with me, think of Peru tonight, not as a headline, but as a place where the ground shifted and people are pausing, listening, looking after each other. The Andes stand as they have for ages. The Pacific keeps its long breath against the shore, and in towns and cities we cannot see from here, someone is checking that a neighbor is all right. Tajikistan has been quietly widening its circle this week, signing 11 new agreements with Mongolia to deepen a strategic partnership between the two countries. The details remain scarce, but the gesture itself speaks to something larger. Both nations sit in neighborhoods where alliances shift and larger powers cast long shadows. Finding a partner across the steppe in the mountains, one who shares an interest in stability and steady development, is not a dramatic move, but it is a deliberate one. Mongolia and Tajikistan have little in common at first glance. One is vast and grass-covered, the other vertical and river-fed. But both know what it means to sit between giants, to negotiate carefully, to build slowly. 11 agreements suggest they've found more than one thing to talk about. For listeners who think of Tajikistan mainly as a place of high peaks and ancient Silk Road routes, this is a reminder that the country is also at work in the present tense. Signing papers, building ties, looking outward. Not loudly, not in a way that demands attention, but steadily, the way you build something meant to last. Two countries far apart on the map, finding common ground, and perhaps that is enough to carry into the night. Iraq sits between powers that do not always ask its permission. These days, that position carries a quiet human cost. At Erbil, in the north of the country, American forces have been working alongside Iraqi partners at a base that has become a kind of crossroads, a place where the region's tensions arrive uninvited. An Iranian drone came down there, and a soldier tried to make it safe. Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, 30 years old, from Fayetteville, North Carolina, was killed during the controlled detonation. He was a father. He loved his wife and 2 children, and the people who knew him at Fort Bragg described a man who carried that love plainly. Iraq did not choose to be the ground where these things happen. The country has its own life, its own mournings, its own griefs, but it holds the weight of other nations' conflicts, and sometimes that weight settles on a single person, a single family, a single base in the north. Sergeant Swinton was doing the work of making something dangerous harmless. That work has a cost that does not always stay on the field. If you're still with me, hold a thought for his family tonight, and for the country that holds, without choosing to, the middle ground between powers larger than itself. Canada finds itself in a familiar kind of pressure these days, caught between a neighbor's demands and its own sense of footing. The United States has moved to impose tariffs of 50% on many Canadian imports, with President Trump framing it bluntly, that Canada needs the American market to survive. It's the sort of language that travels fast across a border, and Canadians have heard versions of it before. Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded not with matching volume, but with steadiness. He confirmed that Washington has agreed to talks aimed at averting the new tariffs, a sign that both sides, for now, see a door still open. The choice Canada faces is not a small one. Whether to push back hard or hold a firm, quiet line, and there's no consensus yet on which path carries less risk. The tension has already reached into small corners of shared life. A planned joint celebration of a bridge between the two countries was quietly canceled, the kind of gesture that tells you something has shifted even before formal negotiations begin. And beneath the trade story, another thread. President Trump has blamed Canada for wildfires drifting south, though scientists continue to point to a changing climate as the deeper cause. If you're still with me, what Canada carries into these weeks is something many places know: the weight of sitting next to power and the patience it takes to remain yourself within it. The talks haven't begun in earnest yet, but the table at least is being set. Palestine has long been a land where faith and witness are inseparable from the ground beneath one's feet. This week, a quiet question resurfaces from a small but persistent story. Why did a document called Kairos Palestine provoke such intense attacks? The word Kairos comes from Greek, meaning a decisive moment. The document, written by Palestinian Christians, was meant as a word to the world about life under occupation, a call to conscience, rooted in the belief that faith demands truth-telling. What's striking is not just that it was written, but that it drew such fierce response. A quiet act of testimony became, for some, something to be countered, discredited, pushed away. And that reaction tells its own story about how uncomfortable it can be when people speak in their own voice, especially from within a shared tradition of faith. If you're still with me, consider what it means to write a letter to the world when the world seems not to be listening. The Kairos document was that kind of letter. It named suffering. It asked for solidarity. It insisted that silence is not neutral. And for that, it was met not with dialogue but with intensity, the kind that suggests the words reached somewhere they weren't expected to reach. The story of Kairos Palestine is, in the end, about the cost of bearing witness, and about how a single document carried on faith can still echo long after it was first read. Timor-Leste sits at the eastern edge of the Indonesian archipelago, a small country with a long memory. It is one of the youngest nations in the world, and its people carry a history shaped by occupation, struggle, and an insistence on self-determination that never quite broke. These days, there is a sense of engagement in the air, a country still finding its footing, but doing so with its eyes open. The story here is not a single event, but a feeling that the hard-won independence claimed not so long ago is still being lived, still being built, day by day. You can see it in the way the country navigates its place among neighbors, joining regional conversations, expanding cooperation in food and fisheries, weighing decisions about its natural resources with care. There is oil and gas beneath the sea, and surveys underway along pipelines that could shape the economy for years to come. But beneath the policy questions lies something older, a culture of resistance, of people who held on to who they were when the world looked away. If you're still with me, consider this. Timor-Leste's story is not finished. It is being written now by people who remember what it cost to have a country at all, and who carry that memory forward with a quiet, steady pride. Oman's southern coast, along Dhofar, is facing what's being called an environmental catastrophe. A tanker has run aground off that shore, and the concern now is what spills from it could do to one of the most quietly remarkable stretches of water in the Arabian Sea. Dhofar's coast is not just scenery. During the summer monsoon called the Kharif, this coastline turns green, and the seas around it sustain fishing communities that have worked these waters for generations. A grounded vessel carrying oil is exactly the kind of threat that arrives without much noise but settles in for a long time. The reporting so far is spare, just the shape of the problem. A tanker off the coast, stuck. The word catastrophe attached to it, which tells you the people closest to this are not treating it as routine. What happens next will depend on how quickly the vessel can be secured, whether its cargo can be transferred safely, and how the wind and current decide to move. Along any coast, those are the variables that turn a bad day into a long season of recovery. If you have never been to Dhofar, it is worth knowing that this is a coast Oman has long guarded carefully, not because it is famous, but because it is theirs, and because the life there has its own rhythm tied to the sea. Tonight, that rhythm is under pressure, and the people along that shore are watching the water. Indonesia has trimmed the budget for its free meals program once more, bringing it down to $12.8 billion. It's a big number still, but it's smaller than what was first imagined. The program is meant to reach people across the archipelago, a country of more than 270 million spread across thousands of islands. So the scale was always going to be extraordinary, and the arithmetic was always going to be difficult. What we're watching, in these quiet adjustments, is a government trying to hold on to the shape of a promise while the numbers settle around it. There's no drama in a revision like this. Not really. It's the kind of thing that happens when a vision meets a spreadsheet. But for the families the program is meant to reach, the difference between a full budget and a trimmed one isn't abstract. It's whether the rice arrives, whether there's something with it, whether the truck can make it down that last stretch of road. Indonesia is still building this, still figuring out what it can afford to give. And so that work continues, quietly, patiently, one meal at a time. Lebanon is waiting. That's the feeling in Beirut this week, after a meeting at the White House between the American president and Lebanon's leader. The two sat down together, and afterward there were promises, support for peace, help for the country. But on the question that hangs over so much here, when Israeli troops might withdraw from Lebanese territory, there was no timeline offered, no date, just a vow to help. And yet, alongside that uncertainty came something unexpected. Direct flights between the United States and Lebanon, suspended since 1985, have been authorized to resume. 41 years is a long time, long enough that some Lebanese Americans have never flown home without changing planes somewhere else. For a country where the diaspora is woven into daily life, that matters. Families separated by an ocean just got a shorter road between them. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground remains delicate. The Lebanese army has accused Israeli troops of firing as Lebanese forces deployed in what's being called a pilot zone, a small test of whether the two sides can share the same ground without sparks. It's the kind of moment that asks for patience from everyone involved. So Lebanon holds two things at once, the hope of reconnection and the weight of an unfinished departure. Both are real. Both are felt in the same streets, and tonight, that's where the country sits between a door opening and one that hasn't quite closed yet. Samoa sits in the middle of the Pacific, and these days its conversations with New Zealand are stretching across a wide map. The two countries' prime ministers have been holding bilateral talks, and by all accounts they covered extensive ground. The kind of cooperation that doesn't make for loud headlines, but quietly holds two nations together. New Zealand and Samoa share a long history, of course. There's the Treaty of Friendship, decades of migration, family ties that crisscross the ocean. So when their leaders sit down together, it's rarely a single-issue meeting. It's more like checking in with a neighbor you've known your whole life. You talk about everything, because everything connects. The details of what was discussed remain general in the reporting, but the framing itself tells you something. When cooperation is described as extensive, it usually means the relationship is healthy enough to spread across many areas: health, economy, climate, education, without any one of them needing to be a crisis. That's not nothing. In a region where rising seas and shifting geopolitics keep leaders busy, a meeting that simply covers a lot of practical ground is its own kind of good news. If you're still with me, you might picture two people at a table, the Pacific outside the window, talking through the ordinary work of keeping a friendship in good repair. It doesn't always need to be dramatic. Sometimes the best news from a place is that things are being tended to, steadily, carefully, across water that has connected these islands for a very long time. Turkmenistan sits on some of the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and for years now, there's been a plan to send that gas south, through Afghanistan, through Pakistan, onward to India. They call it the APD pipeline, named for the four countries it's meant to connect. This week, diplomats from Turkmenistan met with officials from Afghanistan's Taliban government to talk about the pipeline's progress. The details of what they discussed aren't widely known, but the meeting itself tells you something. The pipeline, if it's ever completed, would stretch over 1,000 miles across some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. It would cross Afghanistan entirely. So whatever else is happening in that country, the conversation about APD hasn't stopped. Turkmenistan has been quiet but persistent about this project. The country is officially neutral, keeps largely to itself, and yet here it is, sitting down with the Taliban to keep talking about pipes and gas and the long route south. There's something steadying about that in its way. A pipeline is a slow thing. It outlasts governments, outlasts headlines. And Turkmenistan seems to understand that, treating this not as a dramatic gesture, but as unfinished business that simply needs another conversation, and then probably another one after that. If you're still with me, picture that route. The gas fields of Central Asia, the mountains, the plains, the long road to the sea. It's not finished yet. But they're still talking about it, and sometimes that's the part that matters most. Kuwait sits at the edge of a conflict that has reached into the machinery of daily life. Iranian forces have struck power and desalination plants on Kuwaiti soil, and Kuwaiti officials say this was not the first time. The attacks caused damage to facilities that are, in this corner of the world, nothing less than essential. In a country with almost no fresh water of its own, desalination plants are how a city drinks. Power plants keep the air conditioning running, the hospitals lit, the ordinary rhythm of an evening intact. When these places are hit, it is not a distant abstraction, it is the infrastructure of survival. The strikes came as part of a wider exchange. Iran lashed out after American forces hit Iranian ports and cities, and Kuwait, along with Bahrain and Jordan, found itself caught in the reach of that response. Kuwait's government summoned Iran's ambassador, a formal protest. The diplomatic way of saying this has gone too far. For now, the extent of the damage is still being understood. The facilities stand, and in Kuwait, as across the Gulf these days, people are watching and waiting with the steadiness of those who know that storms, when they come, are waited out, and that what matters is what remains standing when they pass. In the Republic of the Congo, scientists have confirmed something remarkable, a new species of monkey hidden in the vast rainforest that stretches across the region. It is the kind of discovery that reminds us how much of the world still sits quietly beyond our reach. The Congo rainforest is the second largest tropical rainforest on Earth, a place of extraordinary diversity where rivers thread through ancient canopy and the sounds of life never quite go silent. For the people who live alongside it, the forest is home, a source of food and medicine and meaning. For scientists, it remains one of the planet's great frontiers. Finding a new primate species is rare. Primates are among the most studied animals on Earth, and to confirm a new one means that somewhere in the dense green shadows, a distinct lineage has been living its life unnoticed by science. The researchers describe the monkey as striking, though the full details of its appearance have yet to reach the wider world. What makes such a discovery matter is not only the science, it is the reminder that these forests hold creatures we may not yet know, and that protecting them protects stories we have not yet heard. For now, the monkey goes on in its forest home, as it has for generations, unbothered by the news of its own discovery, and the rainforest, ancient and patient, keeps its quiet watch over all of it. Malawi is quietly strengthening its response to measles along its borders, working to contain an illness that knows no lines on a map. Measles travels the way people travel, across markets, across bus routes, across the everyday crossings that connect families and trade between neighboring countries. For a nation nestled between Zambia, Mozambique, and Tanzania, that means vigilance at the edges is part of keeping communities safe inside. The effort is described as a stepped-up cross-border response, which suggests coordination with neighboring health authorities and a recognition that outbreaks don't ask for passports. Measles is one of the most contagious diseases we know. A single case can ripple outward quickly, especially where vaccination coverage has gaps. What health teams in Malawi are doing now is the unglamorous, essential work of tracing contacts, checking immunization records, and making sure vaccines reach the places where people actually move and gather. It's the kind of story that rarely leads a broadcast. There are no dramatic images, no single defining moment. But there is something steady in it. A country paying attention to a threat before it grows, working alongside its neighbors rather than alone. If you're still with me, picture the border posts, the health workers with clipboards and vaccine coolers, the parents bringing children forward for a shot that can prevent so much suffering. That's where the real news is tonight, not in the loud things, but in the careful ones. Morocco has put its name to something vast. Leaders from across West Africa gathered to sign an agreement for a gas pipeline connecting Nigeria to Morocco, a project valued at $25 billion. It's a line drawn across the map, running through countries that have long shared coastlines but not always shared infrastructure. The idea is straightforward, even if the engineering won't be. Take the gas that sits beneath the Niger Delta and move it north, along the Atlantic coast, through nation after nation, until it reaches Moroccan shores. From there, it could eventually reach European markets. What makes this more than a business deal is the route itself. Every country the pipeline touches becomes a partner, not just a waypoint. There's talk of energy access for communities along the path, of industries that might grow where the gas passes through. $25 billion is a number large enough to sound abstract, but what it really means is years of construction, of negotiations, of cables laid beneath seabeds and pipes sunk into earth. Morocco has been positioning itself as a bridge between Africa and Europe for some time now, a place where goods and people and ideas cross in both directions. This pipeline, if it's built, would be one more thread in that bridge. And for the countries along the way, it's a bet on connection, on the idea that energy flowing north can carry something else with it. Opportunity, perhaps, or just the quiet certainty of being linked to something larger than yourself. And that's the world for tonight. Wherever you are, whatever tomorrow holds, rest easy. The world will keep turning slowly while you sleep, and we'll take another quiet trip around it tomorrow night. Good night.